Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
We are live.
Awesome. Welcome to our webinar today. We're glad you could join us. This presentation is titled Getting Started in Mexico and is being presented by Debbie Gurtler. Before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items. First, this class is being live streamed to Facebook on the FamilySearch Library Facebook page, as well as the RootsTech Facebook page, the FamilySearch Facebook page, rootstech.org, and the FamilySearch YouTube page. So if you want to see this video after it's over, then go to one of those channels and you'll be able to watch a recording after it's over. If you have a question, please post it in the chat or comment if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll try to answer your questions. This is a very fast-paced webinar, so we may not get to all of them, but we'll do our best to answer them as they come in. We currently have a live transcript on Zoom. So to stop seeing subtitles, click on the live transcript button at the top of the screen and select hide subtitles. And now we're going to turn the time over to Debbie.
All right. Thanks, Savannah. This is Getting Started with Your Research in Mexico. The objective of the presentation today is to learn how to trace your ancestors from Mexico. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the research process, the record types that you will be using, and we'll talk about some finding aids to help you find the records, and then some language helps for those of you that don't speak Spanish. So this is our icon that we use here in the library to teach our volunteers about the research process. So I just want to go over this briefly. First step always is to gather known family information. And you can do that by talking to family and interviewing the older members of the family and get some more information. Next, you're going to want to choose a research goal. That means picking a person that you want to research and making sure you have enough information to research them. And then you will try to find a record to search for them. And then once you've found some records, you will evaluate that information. And then as always, it's always good to share what you find with your family and friends because they're all cousins and they would love to see what you're doing. So let's take a look over here at a research problem. So here's a pedigree from Family Tree. And I have Florencio Adame and Antonia Robles. And I don't have any firm information for either of their parents, but I'm more interested in working on Florencio. So I'd kind of like to learn more about them. And maybe this is where you're at in your tree as well. You have a couple, but you don't know where to go from here. So hopefully this will help you. So the next step is to think about all the clues that you know. So based on some other information that I found, I know that he was born about 1848 in Mexico. I know the name of his wife, Antonia Robles, and I also know that he had some of his children christened in the parish of Apostol in Tepetongo, Zacatecas, beginning in 1872. So I'm thinking marriage might be happening sometime before 1872 or earlier. And so my question is, should I search for his birth or baptism? If you think about the information here, I don't really have enough information to search for his birth. I don't know where. And if I found a birth record, how would I know it was him if I don't know the names of his parents? So those are some really good reasons why, in this case, you don't want to start with his birth record. Let's take a look at this little strategy chart that we've got here as we're thinking about choosing our research goal. So in this first column where it says event or record type, these are the types of records that perhaps you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for a birth or a baptism, a marriage, a death or burial, or some immigration information. In order to be successful in finding the record that corresponds in that first column, you need to know some information from each of the next three columns. So for example, for a birth or a baptism record, I need to know who the parents of Florencio are. So if I find it, I can say, oh yeah, that's him because those were the names of his parents. Or, oh, his brother, I found his siblings and they all had the same parents, so I know that's him. I also need a birth date, and that can be estimated because sometimes we don't know that, or perhaps the birth date of a sibling if we know that. And then we need to have a place. So whether it's a birthplace or a place where we know the family lived, that's always a good place to start. And it's the same thing with each of these others, with marriage, with death, with immigration. You need to know some of the from each of these columns. Otherwise, you need to back up in your tree. I know nobody likes to do it, but you need to back up in your tree and make sure you have a good solid information to start with to begin your searching. So let's go back to our example. So I've decided I want to identify the parents of Florenzio Adame, born about 1848. So this is what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to go back to Family Tree and I'm going to look at all those sources that are already attached and look through the images and see if I can find more information. Now, I know commonly in the state of Zacatecas, christening records oftentimes have the names of grandparents. That might give me the names of his parents, and I could find some more records to confirm that. I could look for his marriage record in Tepetongo because I found several kids christened there, and especially the oldest known child was christened there, so I could start there. Or, and as I mentioned earlier, I want to find and review those baptism records that may already be attached in the tree. It's important to remember when working in Mexico that a lot of the records, not all of them, but a lot of the records have been indexed. So start by putting in the names and searching, and I'll give you some tips on how to do that as well. And first of all, let's talk about finding the locality. So what if your grandpa, your abuelo, says the name of the place where he's from is a little ranchito somewhere in who knows where, in Jalisco or Oaxaca. So one couple of the options that you have for finding the locality are Google. You could try Googling it and see if it comes up. But probably your best bet in Mexico is to use a gazetteer. And in Spanish, those are called diccionarios geográficos. And I'll show you our favorite one that we use here in the library on a daily basis for Mexico. And then you're going to want to find the records. And the best place for records from Mexico, with the exception of border crossing records, is FamilySearch. We'll talk more about border crossing records when we get there. So when finding the locality, I mentioned our favorite gazetteer, Diccionario Geográfico, is we call it Garcia Cubas. It's a historical gazetteer, and you can find a link to it in the FamilySearch wiki if you will search for the article Mexico Gazetteers. And this is why you're going to want to look for it. So let's say Grandpa said that he was from Pocitos. As you can see here in the gazetteer, we have 15 ranchos with the same name. And then we have the states that have places with that name. Now, if it's from Tamaulipas, I can see there's only one. So, and they're both in the municipality of Reynosa. It's important to know the municipality because that's going to lead us to the civil registration records. And it may also lead us to the church records because there may only be one church in that particular area. Now, if it was Guanajuato, it says there's one in the municipality of San Felipe and one in Santa Cruz, then I might want to ask Grandpa some more questions or look and see how far apart these are, or I might look in one and then look in the other if there's no family tradition that indicates what might be the nearest municipality. So that's why Garcia Cubas is important for helping us to find the records, especially when it's a rancho or a hacienda or some smaller place that's not part of a larger municipality. Jurisdictions are the key. So as we talk about record types, you have your two big ones in Mexico. The first one is civil registration. This is a more modern record. It is government records of birth, marriages, and deaths. It was mandated by law in 1857. Most places got on board in the 1860s. And then, of course, your big one is your Catholic Church records. These are for your earlier records. But even so, if you're looking for a record, let's say in 1880 or 1890, I would look for both of these because the civil registration might have more information than the church, or the church record might have more information than the civil record. So it's important to look at both of these records for your ancestors to see all the clues that are there to help you push your tree back. Now, as I mentioned before, civil registration are records of births, marriages, and deaths. Now, you may know if you've done any research at all that sometimes you find two marriage records and they have two different dates. What's going on with that? Well, one of them is what we call the presentación. This is when the couple went into the civil registration office and said, hey, we want to get married. Let's start the process. That is the presentación. Later, could be as a few weeks or a month or two, they come in and they finalize the marriage, and that's called the matrimonio. So when you see two marriage dates in Mexico, the second one is the actual marriage date. The first one is probably the presentación, but you're going to know that if you go in and look at the image, because they usually label which one is a presentación and which one is the matrimonio or the casamiento. As I mentioned, these are government records and you need to know the municipality. They started in Mexico in 1857 by law, but most places did not get on board until the 1860s. For the Catholic Church records, they cover a large part of the population, whether they went to Mass every week or if they only went on Easter and Christmas. They have baptisms, marriages, and deaths. The death records are usually burial records. The baptism records are substitutes for birth records because often the child was baptized within a few days of its birth, and it might indicate that in the record and say, I baptized a child who was 3 days old, the son of, so it gives you an idea of when you can calculate the birth date. Another important record is what we call a marriage information file or información matrimonial. This is very similar to what we call the presentación. It's when the couple goes in, talks to the priest, and wants to get started on the marriage process so that they can get married. And it's kind of the application. The priest does a little investigation, make sure everything is on the up and up before he actually marries them. And then we have confirmation records, not as common to be used in Mexico, but sometimes they can be used to help identify if a child dies young and perhaps their burial record is not recorded and the child, you can't find him making communion or being confirmed. The jurisdictions to know for church records are the parish and the diocese. The most important one is the parish because the parish priest usually recorded all of this information. The diocese may have records like dispensations. They're not as common in Mexico, though, so I would be more focused on the parish records when I'm researching in Mexico. All right, let's talk a little bit about record content. So in a birth or a baptism record, you always get the name of the child. In a civil record, you may get right down to the hour, the date, and the place of birth. In the church record, you're going to get the baptism date, and it may give you the child's birth date, or it may say the child was 8 days old or 4 days old or whatever it might happen to be. In the records, you usually also get the parents, you get their names and their marital status. Now, if you just get the name of a mother and it says hijo or hija natural, that is your clue that the child is probably illegitimate. So keep that in mind because the father won't be listed. And so it's important to remember that, and maybe a later record in that child's life might indicate who the father was. Maybe the child will be recognized later. So under parents, you might also in the civil records find their ages and their profession, and then you also might find their birthplace, and that's going to be in the form of the words natural de or originario de, meaning native of or originally from, and so those are keywords to look for as well. Also in a birth or a baptism in the civil record, you'll see witnesses and it might give their age, their marital status, their profession, maybe their birthplace, again, in the form of natural de or originario de. And then if there's any relationship, usually there isn't, but you never know. And then in the church records, you have the padrinos, which are the godparents or the sponsors. They do not give relationships, or very seldom do they give relationships. But if they share a common surname, you may want to investigate them to see if they are actually relatives as well. Some possible additional treasure, which is what makes researching in Mexico wonderful, is you often get the names of the grandparents, the paternal and the maternal grandparents. The paternal grandparents, if it's only only the mother's the only one listed in the record, then you will not get the paternal grandparents. But you might also get the marital status of the grandparents if they're still living and where they were born, where they were from. So great records, very rich in information. In marriage records, you always get the name of the bride and groom. You get their age, mostly in civil, although sometimes you can get it in the church record. Marital status, meaning if they were married before and they were a widow. Their birthplace, where they're living, and residence will be in the form of the words vecino de or vecina de, meaning resident of. This profession is usually only found in the civil records, and you almost always get the names of the parents. About the rare exception might be if this is a second marriage for one of them, and then will have to go find that first marriage to see what the parents were listed there. Some possible additional information are the names of witnesses, the name of the church marriage, the date of the church marriage in the civil record, and any other documents about the couple's ability to marry, if there were any impediments to the marriage. In a death or burial record, you usually get the date and place of death. In a church record, it might just be the date of the burial, but you can assume, because there wasn't embalming back then, that the person probably died within a few days of the burial, if not the same day. You'll get their age and marital status. Age is more common in civil, but you can find it in church records as well. If the priest says about 50 or about 60, that's your clue that it's probably not an exact age. So take it with a grain of salt. And the deceased is not there to complain about it. You get their profession, birthplace, and or residence. And again, that's natural de or vecino de. And parents' names if they're not married, a spouse's name if they were married. On a few rare occasions, you'll get them both. So possible additional information in the civil, you'll get the cause of death, the burial place. Every once in a while, you might get the names of heirs or children, and you might get some information about whether or not the deceased left a will, and that's another clue that you'd want to look for if that's a possibility. So let's talk a little bit about the presentación. As I mentioned, it's the application and paperwork required to get married. It usually has more information than the marriage. So when you're looking for these, they might be a few days or weeks or maybe even a month. Or if you're looking in the book, a few pages or several pages before the actual civil marriage. Sometimes they're in separate books, but most of the time they're in the same book. And the church records, this type of record is called the Información Matrimonial or the marriage information file. And it might have birth information about the couple, the names of their parents, if there was an impediment, and they may even have statements from witnesses that know the couple and know about their ability to marry, and how they're related to them if they're testifying on their behalf. So the confirmations, as I mentioned, are not as helpful. Usually what you get is the name of the parish, the date, the name of the child, and the names of the godparents or the sponsors. Sometimes you get the names of parents, sometimes you don't. If the priest groups them together by families, then all the children from one family together, then that might help you to be able to identify them a little bit better. They're not my favorite go-to record, so just keep that in mind as you're looking through those. And also, in some places, a priest may come every year to do the confirmations. In other places, he may come every 5 or 10 years. So it's not unusual in those far spread out places to see babies and adults being confirmed because the bishop has not been to the parish for 10 years. And so a lot of confirmations need to be caught up. So keep that in mind as you're looking at confirmation records. Now, some other records in Mexico, they took a 1930 national census, which is wonderful, except if you lived in the Distrito Federal, if you lived in Mexico City or around there, because that part of the census is totally missing. It's disappeared. We don't know where it is. There are a few other random places throughout Mexico that are missing it, but the big hit is Mexico City. If you check the FamilySearch catalog for your town, you can tell whether or not it was included in the 1930 census. The other good record is for recent immigrants is border crossings into the USA. They are best after 1910. So if your ancestor crossed before then, you're going to want to try some other methods to figure out where he's from in Mexico. And there is a class that I recorded last year for Roots Tech called Crossing the Frontera, and you can see that and learn more about how to find information about Mexican immigrants. And while I'm here, don't forget to register for Roots Tech. It's opening up soon. All right, now let's talk about using the FamilySearch catalog. The FamilySearch catalog has links to digitized images, books, periodicals, maps, and lots of other resources. This picture is a picture of a portion of all the books we have for Mexico. So come see us. We got lots of stuff. So we have extensive holdings. You would want to use the catalog to find out if the records that you need are digitized and if they have been indexed, because the catalog can indicate that as well. And then you can also look for other items for your locality or for your surname. Remember to search at the different jurisdictional levels. So in Mexico, you'll have national and state, not so many records on the county level or the district level, but and the city or the municipality. And sometimes parishes would be the next level down. You must know how to spell the name correctly, or you can use places within, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So some of the ways that you can search are by place, surname, title, author, subject, and keyword. And you can also do a combination search where you might put in a surname and a keyword, or a surname and a place. And I'll show you one example of that in just a second. So to get to the catalog, here I am on FamilySearch, and I've clicked on search, and the drop-down menu appears, and I'm going to choose catalog. That's going to take me to the catalog search engine where I have those search options that I just mentioned. To open up a field and enter some information that corresponds to that category, you just click on it and it'll open right up. You can also search by call number. If you already have the number for a book, or you have the number for a film or a DGS number, you can search for those. Click on them, they'll open right up. You can also choose whether you want to see anything that's available, only what's online, or only what you can see in your Family Search Center. And my preference is to leave it as any, because I want to know everything that's available. So here is the search engine. Also, if you have found a book in our catalog, but you're not going to be able to make it to Salt Lake anytime soon, you can use WorldCat to see if it's in a library near you, and you could go visit it, or maybe you can do interlibrary loan if it's a place that does that. The Family Search Library does not do interlibrary loan. Also, Archive Grid allows you to find archival grade materials from around the world to those that participate in that service. All right, I mentioned a combination search. So in this search, I'm going to do a place, Mexico, and the surname Velasco. So that I've clicked on place by default is always open. I clicked on surname where I could add in Velasco, and then it would bring back the results of everything that included both Mexico and Velasco in the catalog entry. So that's one key way to search in the catalog. And I would recommend when you're in Spanish-speaking countries like Mexico, that maybe your keywords search is in Spanish. That helps. Registros militares, military records, you can get better results, I found, by doing them in language. All right, now let's put it in Jalisco. So as I start to type in Jalisco, it starts to offer me some options, and then I choose which one works best for what I need. So in this case, I want to choose the state of Jalisco. So once I put that in, I have it there in the search engine. Now you don't have to enter it like you see here, Mexico, comma, Jalisco. If you just start typing in the name of the state or the name of the town, it'll automatically add the rest of the jurisdiction, but it'll reformat it to show it from largest jurisdiction to smallest. Then I'm going to click on search, and then it's going to bring up my results. Now, these are all records that are available that cover the entire state of Jalisco. If I want to look for different towns within Jalisco, if I don't know, I'm not sure how to spell it, this is a good way around it. So I click on places within, then I can look through the list and see if I can find the one that I'm looking for, because maybe I don't know how to spell it. So in this case, let's look at Encarnacion de Diaz. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to take me to this page that has records specific for this town. Now you'll notice there's not a census indicator here. So this town is not covered by the 1930 census, but I have church records, civil registration, genealogy, and social life and customs. Those are probably books about families that lived in that town, the last two, that is. Now we're going to choose the church records, and that if I click on it, it's going to open up this option where I can see parish registers, and I'm going to click there on that blue link, and it's going to take me to this page where I can read more about the records, where they came from, when they were microfilmed, how many rolls there are. And there's this little link here that says, oh, if you want to watch it, want to view them, click here. But wait, first of all, scroll down. There's a better way. As you scroll down, you will see this list of collections. So this is baptisms, 1778 to 1802. And then here's a film number and a DGS number. If I want to go through the images in just this collection, just this, what used to be a roll of microfilm is now a set of digital images, I can click on the camera and I can go through them one by one. The magnifying glass tells me that some or part of this collection has been indexed, and I can click on the magnifying glass and then it will bring up a search engine where I can search. So that's one way that one reason I like the catalog is so that I can find and see what has been indexed, and maybe I can find it quicker that way. Now, what do these icons mean? As I mentioned, the magnifying glass icon means that some of the records from that collection, maybe all of them, but maybe not, have been indexed and you can search by name. The camera icon takes me to the image viewer where I can go through the pages one by one, just like the old microfilm that we used to crank with the handle on. The camera icon with the key, nope, nobody likes that one. Records are viewable, but they have some additional restrictions. Sometimes those restrictions are lifted. Solomon only, sorry, switch to Spanish there for a minute. Sometimes they're lifted only by logging in with your FamilySearch account. Sometimes you need to be at a FamilySearch center or you need to be here in the library. Those restrictions come from the archives where we got the records. It's not FamilySearch being mean. It's just part of the contract. And in order to have the records, we got to obey the rules of the contract. So keep that in mind. Now, if you see the microfilm roll icon, yes, every microfilm has been digitized that was in the vault, but some of them were filmed back before who'd ever heard of the internet. So in some cases, they have to go back and renegotiate contracts, or in other instances, they might be severely restricted and you're not allowed to look at them. So just keep that in mind. Be patient with us. Now let's also talk about item numbers. So the item numbers that you see after a film are super important because that's like a chapter in a book. So make sure you write down that item number or remember it before you jump into the image viewer, because if I'm looking for these marriages 1861 to 64, I'm going to have to jump all the way to item 15 to begin. If I start right at the beginning, I'm not going to find them and I'm going to get super frustrated. I'm going to wonder, oh, liars, where are they? That's not the case. You just need to make sure that you go to where they actually are. Another thing to note is where there are commas here, those are gaps in the records. So just FYI. Now, some of these may be filled by other records, so just make sure you check through the entire list. Let's take a look at the image viewer here. So here's our image viewer. And remember I mentioned the item numbers. This is the end of item 1. This is the beginning of item 2. So in that other one that I just showed you, I'd have to scroll ahead in all these images until I got to number 15. All right, so over here on the left, we have options to enlarge or reduce. And you can also, if you have a roller on your mouse, you can use that as well. I have the option here to view one image and the option to view the whole thing in full screen, which is great for those of us with old eyes. For browsing the images, I have options here with arrows to go one at a time, or I can enter in a number here and jump ahead. And then on the right-hand side, I have some tools as well to attach this to my source box, to attach it to Family Tree, to print, download, or other tools to adjust the image quality. Don't use the print feature here, FYI. Download it and use your photo printer or what you use to print photos, because if you use the print feature here, it will only print what shows on the screen. You may not get the whole document. So FYI, don't use that print feature there. All right, so here I am on one single image. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll find an image index when it's available of names that have been indexed from this particular image. And the next tab over is the collection information. Where did this come from? And if you scroll down a little bit further, if there's a citation option, you have a copy citation button and you can copy that and paste it into wherever you need it to be, a report, a family tree program, whatever it might be. So let's talk about finding the image of an index record, because you'll may be doing a lot of this in Mexico. So here is a marriage that I found for Florencio Adami. Remember, that was my research question. So this is the indexed information that I pulled from the results page. I'll give you a little tour of this page. Over here, it shows me this record is attached in Family Tree to Florencio Adami. Now I could go there and look at the record, and I looked at it, but it brought me back to this same screen. So I need to find that image. Also over here, I have similar records that have similar information as Florencio and Antonia in them, and it could be for the same couple, for the same family. Over here on the left, I have the check image availability. When I click on that, this little screen pops up and says, this came from this group of images. To view it, you need to look through several images. So, and I have the option to browse the film. Sometimes it takes you right to it, but most of the time it doesn't. So let's do the browse the film. And here I am in that film, and these records are in chronological order. But as you can see, sometimes there's indexes. So I can tell because these first few images look different, that these are actually indexes for this particular book or set of images. So I can look at that and see if I can find a page number and narrow down my search. Or I can just jump through the images until I find the right date. So that's another way to do that. Keep in mind, if there's an index at the front like that, there may be two books on one set of images in these records for Mexico. So if they weren't in that first index, you might be thinking, oh, that's not right. Make sure you check to see if there's another book in there as well. All right, as you jump through the images, I jumped ahead so I could find the right date, and I kept one window open with the date so I could remember it. And sure enough, I found the marriage, and the marriage record gives me the names of his parents and also the names of the parents of his bride. So this is how a good way to advance in generations is to find that marriage record, because it's almost always going to give you the names of the parents. And if you don't know when to start that marriage search, look for everybody in the family and then start the marriage search with the birth date of the oldest child. Now, best practices, as you're looking at your results, is there an image attached? If not, you're going to have to browse images. Is there a film number? You can go to the catalog and search for that film number. Is there an item or a page number? That might help you narrow it down quickly. And then also note the date and the location of the record, because that will help you to find it quicker, because you're going to have to jump through those images until you find the right date. Always locate the image of an index record, because it's going to have a lot more information. Remember that indexed information on Florencio's marriage? There was no parents listed there. So because I went to the image, I got the names of the parents. So it's important to do that. When you're doing this process, if you want to, just open another browser tab to look for that record. And then you can flip back when you can't remember what the date was, like I often can't. Read through the record carefully and then attach it to Family Tree. So let's talk about searching records using the search engine. So if you go to, be sure and sign in, because a lot of things are more accessible if you sign in. So if we click on search and then records, it takes you to this field where you can search in FamilySearch all the records that have been indexed. And again, lots of records in Mexico have been indexed, and it's important to do this. So click on more options so you can see what all is available. Here is the full search engine. Most Hispanics use a double surname system, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, how that works. But I recommend that you only search using one surname, because in these early records, they usually only used one surname. The double surname system is more of a recent thing. So here's the surname thing, so you can understand, those of you that don't do Hispanic research. If I'm looking for Juan Perez Ramos, I know that Perez is his father's surname, and I know Ramos is his mother's surname. That's her maiden name, and women don't change their name in Mexico to take their husband's name. So as you think about this, take a second, think about what would your Hispanic surname be? Think about what's your dad's surname, what's your mom's maiden name, and that would be your Hispanic name. So that will make it so much easier. And it also provides a little roadmap. So I know if I'm looking for one, I know dad's going to be Perez and mom's going to be Ramos, and that's going to help me as I do my search. All right, there's also this button to show exact search. I don't recommend it because it doesn't look for any misspellings or other variants that might be there that were indexed incorrectly. So I don't recommend it. Here's the search engine. There's an option there to put first and last name, and also an alternate name. So if I have Francisco Gomez, but he went by Pancho Gomez, I can put in Pancho as well, in case in some record he's known by Pancho or Pacho. For the life event, I can search not only for any, but I can also do birth, marriage, residence. So that would help tease out a census record if there was one, and death. Under relationships, I can add family members, a spouse, a father, a mother, and you can add multiple parents if you need to. And also, this one is often overlooked, the country or location. So if I'm looking for Juan Gomez, I know there's going to be zillions of them around the world. I'm going to narrow mine to Mexico and then the state, whether it's Zacatecas or Jalisco or Chihuahua, but I'm going to use that to narrow down my results. All right, let's do a little search demo, and we're going to look for Pedro Infante. He's born in 1917 in Sinaloa, Mexico, and his parents are Delfino Infante and Refugio Cruz. So if I go to my search engine, I can put in his name, and you'll notice I only put in the paternal surname. I've clicked on birth and added in a birth range just in case my information is off or the record is off. So I put 1915 to 1920. Give yourself a couple years on either side. And then I tell it, I only want to see the ones from the state of Sinaloa in Mexico. So, and then I click search. Here are my results. And there's not a lot. So I'm a big proponent of less is more. When you fill in every single field on the search engine, you narrow your focus so narrow that you might miss some records. So it's important to try a bunch of variations and maybe take some information out. So you can use filters. Here they are. You can filter by different records. So I've clicked on collection, and I can choose the specific collection or the specific category that I would like to look at. So I've got birth, marriage, and death or censuses. So let's choose civil registration, and then I click apply collection filter, and that shows me just results that come from civil registration. Now, if I want, then there's just this one. And this looks like a good match because I've got Delfino and Refugio, and then I've got the place, the year is right, and I've got Pedro Infante. If I want to get rid of the filters and get all my results back, I just click that little X. Always review the indexed information and the image. So you can do that by clicking on the name, or you can click on the paper icon to read the indexed information, the camera to see the image, or this little pedigree icon to view the person that it's attached to in the tree. So here's my record. And over here on the side, I've got a summary of the indexed information. And then down below here, it says attached in family tree 2 and the person it's attached to. So when you're searching by name, always view the image of an index record and add some filters if you have too many results. And again, always look for that original image. Now let's talk a little bit about searching by relationship, because I mentioned that was a possibility. Our families, we all have family connections, spouse, parents, children, siblings. We can use that to our advantage when we're having trouble finding our ancestors. So a spouse search, we can search for the person with the name of one or all of his spouses to see what turns up. And we can also do a parent search where we can search for the entire family using just the names of the parents, or with multiple parents. Maybe they had a biological father and a stepfather. You can do that. And in some instances in Mexico, it's a good search to, besides limiting by location, to search if the surnames are not super common by just the paternal and maternal surname and see what comes up. So let's take a look at how that's done. There are your options to add a family member, and you'd click on one of those and then fill in the information there. So also you've got event places, so there you can add things like birth, marriage, residence, or death. So if I'm going to do a parent search, I'm going to click on father and put in Delfino Infante, and click on mother and put in Refugio Cruz. And then I'm going to put in limit by country of Mexico and the state of Sinaloa. So here you can see what I've done. And you'll notice I didn't put anything up here in the main search field. It's all down here along with this. This allows me to find any record that has these two as parents. So it's a very effective search for finding every member of the family. Now, sometimes you can get a marriage result to appear on the higher up on your results list by focusing specifically on a marriage search. So here I've clicked on marriage and added a date range, 1900 to 1915. And then I put Delfino up here at the top, and then I clicked on spouse and added Refugio down here at the bottom. And then I've put the state. So there's my Delfino, then I've got my marriage. There I've got clicked on spouse and added her, and then I've got the location, the country, and the state. And this tends to focus the results, so my marriages come first. So that's an important tip. Now let's talk about language help for those of you that don't speak Spanish. So there are some good helps out there. One of them is the script .byu.edu site. It's by Brigham Young University. They have some tutorials and some fun stuff. And then we also have the Spanish genealogical word list that's found in the FamilySearch wiki. And then I'll show you how to do Google Translate. So this is the script site, and you're going to want to scroll down the page until you find the Spanish tutorials. And here you're going to find sample records, some little lessons, some alphabet charts, and a whole bunch of things that are going to help you to get better at reading those Spanish records. Because what it really comes down to is practice, practice, practice. So there's the links there that'll take you right to those. Now in the wiki, if I go to on FamilySearch, I click on search and wiki, you'll find the Spanish genealogical word list. And if you just start typing it in, it should come right up. And then it will take you to that page where you can look for it. So there it is there. And then once you're there, then you can take a look at this word list. So as we look at it and we scroll down the page, you can see there's an option to jump right to different sections of the page. And then there's also letters there. As we go down the page, you'll see here's some online resources that will help us, things to do with the language and variations of words, even abbreviation, which is common in Spanish handwriting. Also, we've got here the Spanish alphabet, and you'll notice that CH comes after C, double L comes after L, the N comes after N. So keep that in mind when you're using a dictionary or something that's supposed to be in alphabetical order. Then we go further down, we have accent marks on vowels, and then we also have interchangeable letters, which is another crucial thing that you'll need to know as you read through these records. And so there's a lot of good information here in the FamilySearch wiki for this that will help you. There's things about numbers, all kinds of good information. Also, the most commonly used words in there. And then as we go further down, there's a bunch of other good resources that will be very helpful, dates and times, months. And there's even a printable, a downloadable and printable PDF version of the Spanish word list that might help you. So I highly recommend it for those of you that struggle with Spanish. You'll be much happier once you figure these out. And then keep in mind also that the records in Spanish are very formulaic. They follow a pattern. And once you get that pattern down, you can figure out where you're going to find that key information in the records. And you'll notice we're going through racial designations now. This was common during colonial periods. And then down here at the very bottom, if we click on a letter, we can jump right to the words that start with that letter. Now, this isn't like a Webster's dictionary of all Spanish words. This is more of a words that you might see in a Spanish genealogical record. So keep that in mind. All right, now Google Translate. If you haven't used it, it's fun to use. It's translate.google.com. On one side, you enter in what the Spanish looks like. And then on the right-hand side, magically appears the translation. So this works great, provided you can read the record and you know how to spell it, but it will offer you some spelling suggestions. So step number 4, evaluate the records that you found. What clues were there? Did it say natural de or originario de? That indicates to me that that's where that person said they were born. Edad, their age. I can use that to calculate when they might have been born or when they might have married. Abuelos, grandparents, are they listed in the record? Parentesco de consanguinidad. Was the couple related by blood? If they were related within 4 generations, they needed a dispensation from the church. And that degree of relationship might indicate to you where their common ancestor might be found. So keep those in mind. And then remember the search order that I showed you on the strategy chart. You know, if you're looking for parents and you don't know their names, don't start with the birth record, start with the marriage, or a death record. Once you've found your information, share it with your family, get them excited. Maybe you have a family tree that you share together, a Facebook group or a page. Maybe you keep a blog or you have family communication channels like WhatsApp. So let's do a quick review and then we'll have time for questions. So again, this is the research process: gathering, choosing, finding, evaluating, and sharing. Once I've done that, then I can choose another ancestor and start the whole process again. And if I need to, I might have to back up and gather information about him first. We talked about some major record types, the church records and the civil registration. And then we talked a little bit about finding aids, the gazetteers, Google, and the FamilySearch catalog. And then we talked about some handwriting helps, the script.byu site and the Spanish genealogical word list in the wiki, and also Google Translate. So now that we're to the question point, and I don't know how, we have probably about 5 minutes. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those. And keep in mind that this has been recorded. So if I went too fast for you, and I've been known to do that, I apologize. You can watch it again on YouTube or on the Roots Tech 365 site, and you can watch it and watch something and pause and try some searches and then start it up again so you can get caught up with what's going on, and you won't have to worry about Debbie trying to catch your breath. All right.
Thank you, Debbie. That was fantastic. I'm just kind of looking through. I don't see any questions.
Okay, probably Brandon got them all anyways.
Yeah, so there was one, but he covered it on the YouTube channel. So I don't see any questions. I think.
Okay, well then in that case, I'll do another plug for Rootstack because it's coming up. Registration's opening soon and it's going to be fun. And if you're not coming to Salt Lake, you can watch it online. A wealth of information. So mark your calendars so you can get registered.
Most definitely. Registration opens Monday, I believe. So it's right around the corner.
Yep, it's coming up soon.
We did have one participant raise her hand. If you have a question, could you please put it in the chat?
Brandon posted a question about people changing their names. She went from Pantaleona to Antonina. That's interesting. Sometimes they do that. And in some cases, it might be because when they were christened, they had more than one name and they might have chosen the other one and changed it that way, or they might have just hated their name and just started calling themselves by another name. All right, somebody's asking about Rootstack. So Rootstack is a lot of fun online classes, some interactive chat experiences. It's a place where you can choose different videos to watch to learn more about your family history and how to be a better researcher. There's also been fun classes in the past on culture and cooking and different activities from different cultural regions. And also they also have them in other languages as well. So it's a super fun event and brings genealogists from all over the world, both here and in online. So it'll be both online and in Salt Lake if you can't make it to the Salt Palace.
If you want to learn more about it, I put a link in the chat so that you can do that.
Okay, so Pamela's asking, how do you go about searching when you know they changed the name? If you know what they've changed it to, and so I had an instance of this with a family that I researched from Mexico, and they clearly changed their surname, and I was able to figure it out because while they hadn't changed towns, so I found like marriage records and other things, and then I went back to find baptism records, and I knew all the siblings. Sometimes Full Family Search is what does it, and I could find all of these siblings. Their first names were the same, and their parents' names were the same, but they changed their last name. So sometimes you have to do a lot of full family research to figure out who they are and what they changed their name from. It was an interesting case.
Right, doing one more check to make sure there's nothing else.
Okay.
But thank you, Debbie. You're always very thorough, and I learn a lot from your classes. I don't have Spanish ancestry, but thank you for coming today. And that will conclude our Getting Started with Mexico research. We'll come back again at 3 in about 10 minutes. And our next class will be getting started in New Zealand. So if you have ancestors in New Zealand, come back in about 10 minutes and we'll get that started soon.